Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. My name is Jess and today I'm going to be wrapping up for you the books that I read in the month of April. As I mentioned in my last video, I took a short break from YouTube in the month of April, so I have just uploaded my March wrap up and today is going to be my April wrap up, and I am filming these back to back, hence why I'm wearing the same outfit. So without further ado, let's jump in and start talking about the books. The first book that I finished in the month of April is probably going to land me in a little bit of trouble, in that I think it's an unpopular opinion to have, because I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I have incredibly conflicting opinions about this book. On the one hand, I thought that the writing style was incredibly beautiful. I kind of liked our main characters, although I felt like Luke could have been a little bit darker and a little bit sexier, but I really struggled with the purpose and the plot of the book. So we are following our main character Addie, who makes a deal with a dark spirit demon person to preserve her life. She is in a desperate situation. She's about 24 years old. She doesn't want to get married, so she makes a deal that basically she will never age until she is ready to hand over her soul to this dark spirit that she names Luke. And when we meet Addie, she has been alive for 300 years. She started off in her home village in France and she is now in the USA. The rub with the deal that Addie made with this demon is that she is forgettable. So as soon as she goes out of someone's line of sight, they forget all about her, and that's kind of the trick that was in the deal that she made. And then one day she walks into a bookstore where she is, I think she's in New York, and she meets a guy called Henry who remembers her, and so the story begins to unfold from that point. As I say, I really enjoyed the characters and I thought that V.E. Schwab's writing was very beautiful, but throughout the book there is a sense of tension and anticipation, and you really feel like you are building to something. We flick backwards and forwards from our more present day storyline to many occasions in Addie's past when she has then met again with Luke and he's kind of tried to tempt her to hand over her soul to him, and they have this very tense relationship that kind of borders a little bit on romance but not really. It's a kind of a tug of war, and so there's this sense of anticipation and tension, and you feel like we're building to some huge reveal, or like the story's about to take off, but it never actually goes anywhere. And so you end up just kind of feeling, well, I personally felt a little bit deflated by the time I got to the end. I was kind of like, okay, was that it? I don't know whether there is plans for a sequel, I don't know, but I just felt really disappointed by the way that the story wrapped up. My other issue is that it's just a little bit vanilla. If you had the ability, and maybe this is just like a personal thing, but if I had the ability to go anywhere in the world and experience anything, and I made this deal where I could never get sick and I could never die and I was just always going to be young and able to enjoy my life, and I had this real desperation for something more than myself, which is essentially what drives Addie to make the deal in the first place, would I just go to a few European cities and then the USA? It's like the author had the ability to make this really exotic and exciting novel. Addie could have gone anywhere in the world, but she doesn't. She goes to a few European cities and then she goes to the US, and that's it. And I just really expected more from the book. It took me 10 days to read this book, which is more than 3 times the length of time that it would normally take me to read a book of this size, which I think pretty much says it all, that I just felt a little bit deflated by the book and by the way that it went. So I gave it 3 stars, 3.5 stars. I thought, as I said, the writing was beautiful, some of the characters were okay, but it just was ultimately disappointed. Then I picked up Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. I feel a little bit like a broken record with these books in that I have mentioned them numerous times. If you don't know, I am doing a reread slash new read of Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings books, which are broken up into a number of different trilogies, some of which I've read and some of which I haven't. This is the very first trilogy, and this is the second book, book 2 of the Farseer trilogy. That's a lot of trilogies. So we are following our main character Fitz, who in the first book is taken to bookkeep the heart of the 6 duchies and dumped because he is the bastard born son of the king in waiting, Prince Chivalry, and Fitz's arrival sets off a domino effect of events. In this book, Fitz is being trained to be an assassin for his king. He is kept very much in the shadows, and there is a wider storyline where the 6 duchies is being invaded by people from the Out Islands, and there's various different elements that are going on. This particular trilogy is very much a coming of age for Fitz. It's a setting of the foundations for what comes later. We're introduced to a number of different concepts and characters, and Fitz himself is an incredibly frustrating character to follow in this trilogy. I've read this one before and I've read a couple of them after, and so I know ultimately where we're going, and I have a better appreciation this time for the fact that it's very much him discovering himself and coming of age, and as frustrating for a reader as that is, he needs to go through that process in order to then face what comes later. Robin Hobb's writing is very descriptive, it's very engaging. I love her characters and her character development. I love the world that she has created. I'm very, very excited to be back in and reading it again and getting to experience it. Not for everyone. There's not a lot of plot, particularly in these earlier books. There is not a lot of plot going on. As I said, it's very much setting the foundations for what will come later. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Then I read The Whisper Network by Chandler Baker. This was a buddy read that I did with a wonderful human called Ali, who is the Sunday Feeling on Instagram. I will leave her a link to her account down below. So this is a thriller, and it centres on 4 women who work for a company, and when the CEO of that company abruptly dies, their boss is suddenly in line for the job. But for many years there have been all kinds of stories and rumours and suggestions about how their boss treats women. And with the potential that he is suddenly going to become the CEO of this company, they decide to take action, and it's kind of the fallout from that decision making. I really liked the premise of this book. It was really fast paced. Where I think it got let down is that the writing style was very erratic. It took me a long time to get into it, and I spent the first portion of the book having to go back and reread a number of sections because I would read it and then think I have literally no idea what I have read. There were a number of red herrings. It kept you guessing for quite a long time. I don't know that I massively loved the ending or loved the outcome. I also don't know that I hugely loved the female friendships that were in the book. They didn't feel, they just felt, I don't really know how to adequately describe it other than to say that they just felt a little bit forced and a little bit off, and equally I was left with a lot of questions at the end. There were a number of unresolved plot points and things that we were told that we didn't get to understand why they had happened, and I don't massively love books where that happens, and it happens in a book that I read later on in the month as well, so I will say very similar things. But it was entertaining, it was edgy, it was fast-paced, and I was left guessing right up until the end. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then I'm sure that you would enjoy this. Then I read what is a new purchase for me, and I will do a book haul shortly, but it was War Breakup by Brandon Sanderson. This was bought basically because James has been nagging me to pick up another Brandon Sanderson book, and this is essentially a standalone, and so I could read it without having to commit to one of Brandon's bigger series. This is the story of 2 sisters, one who has been trained her whole life to marry the king, the god king, and one who never does what she's told, and then through a various series of events, the wrong sister basically, is sent by their father to marry the God King. Within this world we have quite a unique magic system, and I'll try to explain this in a way that's not super complex, because I feel like it was a lot of complex concepts all bundled into one book. So it's a world where people who die in heroic circumstances are returned as gods, and they can be kept alive by the inhalation of something called breath. Breath is essentially an essence that allows you to use a biochromatic power to control things around you. So everyone is born with a breath, and they can give their breath away. That makes them a drab. It removes the colour from them. People who have more breaths can use those breaths to animate objects, and so the more breaths you have, essentially the more powerful you are. And there is a very interesting political system where you have the God King, who has been kept alive for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then you have slightly lesser gods who are gifted a breath a week by the local people, kept alive, the idea being that at some point they will give their lives again in service of someone else. Very complex. There's a whole lot going on, and honestly, when I got to the end, I had so many questions that I cannot believe that this is a standalone book. I have seen various rumours that he's writing a sequel, but then maybe not, so I don't know. I have to be honest and say that I am a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson. I think that he is a masterful, wonderful storyteller. One of the things that I really love about his writing style is that it's really easy to read. It doesn't matter how complex a storyline is or a plot point is, he manages to explain it in a way that is really readable and that most readers are just able to get on board with and go. This was not one of my favourites from him. I actually felt a little bit disappointed by it, and I don't think that it reads like a standalone. It just wasn't my favourite. I enjoyed the story for what it was. One of my major issues was that I didn't like either of the sisters. I thought that they were both really whiny and didn't come across as very strong. There were also a number of times when Brandon Sanderson described the perfect female body, and they had big breasts, and that was kind of his major point. They're the perfect human body, the perfect female figure, because they have big breasts, which just felt a little bit off for me. So yeah, it was okay. It wasn't my favourite Brandon Sanderson. I think I'm getting that message across. Would I recommend it? I would definitely not recommend it as the first of Brandon Sanderson's books, because I think that it would potentially put you off the rest of them. I don't think that this represents his wider storytelling skills. It was just okay. Then I finished listening to The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This is my beautiful hardback copy, but actually I listened to the whole of this book. So this is about a woman called Elsa. It's set in the 1930s, and Elsa lives on a farm with her 2 children in Texas, and it is during the Great Depression and the Great Drought in the Dust Bowl. Essentially, the land has been farmed incorrectly, so the top layer is just really dried out, then there's no rain, so nothing can grow, and there's just this perpetuating circumstance. And then Elsa's son Ant gets dust pneumonia, and she is told that if she remains in Texas, her son will die, and so she makes the heart-wrenching hard decision to take her 2 children and flee west to California, the supposed land of milk and honey. But as you might expect, things do not quite turn out the way that she expects when she gets there, and the story is basically the fallout of those decisions. This was a really hard-hitting book. It is beautifully told. I absolutely love the way that Kristen Hanna represents her female characters. They are fierce, they are determined. This is essentially a book about the strength and resilience of women, and I just loved it. There is a great mother-daughter relationship that we get to watch play out that is really difficult at times to read or listen to. There were many moments in this book which brought me to tears, particularly the ending. My only issue with the book, and the reason that I knocked a star off, is because something happens at the end of this book which I thought was quite gratuitous and just put in for that one last shock factor and was unnecessary, and I didn't like it. It did make me cry. It was a crappy ending. It was a crappy ending in terms of the development of our characters, but actually on reflection I think that it was unnecessary, and it would have been a really fantastic book without that final piece as well. On the whole, just a beautifully told story that is incredibly hard-hitting at times, very, very emotional, heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, but also just really inspiring, and there is just this element of hopefulness and family and unity that runs throughout, and as I say, the strength and resilience of women as well. And I just thought that it was great, and I would highly recommend it, and the audiobook was brilliant as well, so yes, thoroughly enjoyed it. And the final book that I read was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This was my book club's pick for the month, and again, this is a book where if I review it from just an entertainment point of view, it was entertaining, it was fast paced, there were a number of twists and turns I didn't see coming. If I look at it more critically, it doesn't necessarily stand up to scrutiny. So we are following the story of a psychotherapist called Theo, who has seemingly out of the blue made it his mission to get a patient at an institution known as the Grove to speak. The patient is a woman called Alicia Berenson, who 6 years ago kills her husband and then hasn't said a word since. And Theo has decided that he is going to be the one who gets Alicia to speak, and that we get to find out what has happened. From the get-go, Theo makes a number of questionable decisions in his role as a psychotherapist, and we watch the story unfold. Because it's a thriller, because it literally hits the ground running, I cannot say too much about what goes on without it being a spoiler, but my main issues were with the author's sweeping statements about psychiatrists and therapists and their treatments of their patients, and the way that that kind of whole world works. And also he raised a number of questionable concepts about psychology as well that I didn't necessarily agree with. One of the major ones being that all babies spend the first 6 months of their lives in a state of absolute terror, and I thought, what a horrible concept. If you're a new mother and you read this and you think, okay, so my baby is basically terrified from the moment that they're born and I'm going to ruin their entire existence because of that, you know, I was just like, not sure that I necessarily agree with that, which did colour my reading experience quite a bit. But yeah, page-turnery, gripping, entertaining, several surprises, tick tick tick. That's how I'm going to review it. I gave it 3 stars. It definitely fits the bill for a book that you just will consume it because you will want to know what the outcome is. Don't look at it any more critically than that. There you go, they are the books that I read in the month of April. Seem to just have lots of mixed bags in terms of my reading experiences, some that I absolutely love and some not so much, but now I'm caught up, which is great, a very good feeling. So thank you very much for watching. Do let me know what you read in the month of April, what your favourite book was, and if you read any of the books that I read and what you thought. If you enjoyed this video, please give me the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I hope that you are all keeping well, take care, and I will see you soon.